Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be tackling negotiation.
Always relevant.
You guys sent in excerpts from the audiobook Getting to...
Yes, a classic.
It's a classic, yeah. This is the second edition, right? So it's been updated, which is
Uh-huh.
cool. We'll be exploring those core principles from Roger Fisher, William Ury,
And Bruce Patton.
and Bruce Patton. That's right. They've got experience, from like personal disputes all the way up to like global conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to extract those key insights and give you some practical takeaways to help you level up your own negotiation skills.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how relevant this book still is. It's not just theory. It's packed with real-world examples, actionable advice.
Yeah, I love how they start with this scenario of haggling for a brass dish in a secondhand store. So think about it. You're in the store, you see this awesome dish, you offer 15 bucks,
Right.
but the shopkeeper's asking for 75.
That's the last thing.
So the back and forth begins. Have you ever been in that situation?
I think we all has at some point, yeah.
Yeah.
This is a classic example of what the authors call positional bargaining. Each side digs in, defends their position, and gives ground grudgingly.
So what's the problem with that? Seems like a pretty normal way to negotiate, right?
Well, the problem is that positional bargaining often fails to produce what the authors call a wise agreement.
Okay.
A wise agreement meets the needs of both sides as much as possible. It's fair, it lasts, and you don't waste a ton of time and energy getting there.
Right?
And importantly, it doesn't ruin the relationship between the parties.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does positional bargaining get in the way of that?
Well, the book has some really powerful historical examples.
Yep.
One that stands out is the breakdown of nuclear testing ban talks between the U.S. and Soviet Union.
Ooh, high stakes.
Yeah, under President Kennedy. They got so stuck on the number of on-site inspections, 3 for the Soviets, 10 for the U.S., that they never even defined what an inspection was.
Oh, wow.
Would it be 1 person for a day or 100 people for a month? Nobody knew, and the talks fell apart.
That's a pretty high stakes example of how fixating on positions can backfire.
It really shows how focusing solely on positions can make you miss the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And it gets even more complicated when you have lots of parties involved. Like, imagine UN negotiations with over 150 countries.
Right.
You're much more likely to see coalitions forming based on symbolic positions instead of finding real solutions.
Okay, so positional bargaining might not be the best way to go. But what about taking the opposite approach, just being nice? Wouldn't that lead to, like, smoother negotiations?
Well, that's a common or negotiation on the merits. This method is all about achieving wise agreements efficiently and amicably.
Okay, that sounds promising.
Yeah.
Tell me more. How does this principled negotiation work?
It's based on 4 key principles. First, separate the people from the problem. Second, focus on interests, not positions.
Okay.
Third, invent options for mutual gain. And finally, insist on using objective criteria.
Okay, those seem like pretty solid principles. Let's break them down one by one.
Sure.
The first one, separating the people from the problem. What does that mean exactly?
It's all about recognizing the human element in negotiation. We bring our emotions, our perceptions, our communication styles to the table.
Yeah.
These things can get tangled up with the actual issues we're trying to resolve.
Right, so it's not just about the what of the disagreement, but the who involved as well.
Exactly. The book has this great example of a union leader mediating a dispute between a worker and a foreman. Each side had a totally different view of the situation because of their roles and past experiences.
I can see that.
Then there's this story of an insurance lawyer facing a hostile commissioner who takes any criticism personally.
Yeah, okay, those are great examples. Like, we need to put on those empathy glasses to see things from the other person's perspective.
That's a great way to put it. It's about understanding their feelings, their values, their experiences, even if you don't agree with them.
And how do we deal with those, like, heated moments when, like, emotions run high?
The book suggests acknowledging those emotions. Let the other side vent. Avoid knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah.
Sometimes just listening patiently can de-escalate the situation.
So instead of getting caught up in the emotional back and forth, we should try to, like, step back and focus on the real issues at hand.
Exactly. And that leads us to the second principle of principled negotiation, focusing on interests, not positions.
This is a key concept, right?
Yeah.
So what's the difference between an interest and a position?
Think of it this way. A position is what you've decided you want. It's your stance.
Right.
An interest is the underlying reason why you want it, your motivation.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you give us an example to illustrate this?
The book tells this funny story about two men arguing in a library.
Okay.
One wants the window open, the other wants it closed. They go back and forth about how much to leave it open, but no solution works.
Yeah.
Then a librarian comes in and asks each man why he wants what he wants.
Uh-huh.
Turns out, one needs fresh air and the other is trying to avoid a draft.
Oh, okay.
The librarian simply opens a window in another room, solving the problem by addressing their underlying interests.
That's such a clever solution.
Hmm.
It seems like getting stuck on positions makes you miss those win-win opportunities.
Often does. When you understand the other side's motivations, you can explore alternatives that meet everyone's needs.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, focusing on interests often reveals shared goals. You might be surprised how often seemingly opposed positions actually stem from compatible or even identical interests.
So how do we go about uncovering those hidden interests? It's like we need to become interest detectives, right?
I like that analogy. It's about asking why and why not to get to the root of their motivations. You'll often find that each side has multiple interests, including basic human needs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So once we've identified those underlying interests, how do we actually use them to reach an agreement?
Well, the book offers some really useful techniques. First, make your interests come alive with specific details and examples.
Okay.
This helps the other side truly understand your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Also, acknowledge their interests as part of the problem. Show them that you're taking their needs seriously.
Okay.
And remember to put the problem before your proposed answer. Focus on working together to solve the problem rather than just pushing your own solution.
It's like we're building a bridge of understanding between the two sides.
Exactly. And that bridge is built on shared interests and a willingness to find solutions that work for everyone.
This is all so insightful. I can already see how this approach can lead to more satisfying and sustainable agreements.
Absolutely. It's a game changer in how we approach negotiations. But there's still so much more to unpack.
You're right. We haven't even touched on the third and fourth principles. Inventing options and using objective criteria.
Hold on to your hats, folks. Things are about to get even more interesting.
All right, let's dive into that next principle. You mentioned inventing options for mutual gain.
Right.
It sounds like this is where we get creative.
Absolutely. This principle challenges the assumption that negotiation is about choosing between limited pre-existing options.
Okay.
Instead, getting to yes encourages us to think outside the box, explore solutions that we might not have considered before.
I can see how that would be beneficial, but I imagine it's easier said than done. Where do we even start?
Yeah, you're right. It's not always easy to break free from that mindset of my way or the highway. The authors identify 4 major obstacles to inventing options.
Okay.
First, we often jump to judgment too quickly.
Uh-huh.
Second, we tend to search for a single right answer. Third, we often assume there's a fixed pie that one person's gain must come at the other's expense.
Right.
And lastly, we sometimes fall into the trap of thinking solving their problem is their problem, failing to see the potential for mutually beneficial solutions.
Okay, let's unpack those obstacles. I know I'm guilty of the first one, premature judgment. As soon as an idea pops into my head, I'm already like dissecting it, finding reasons why it won't work.
It's a natural human tendency, but that critical voice can really stifle our creativity. The book suggests separating the process of inventing options from the process of evaluating them.
Okay.
So, brainstorm first and then judge later.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like giving yourself permission to be playful and explore all sorts of possibilities without limitations.
Exactly. And the book even recommends brainstorming with the other party.
Oh, interesting.
Working together can generate a ton of ideas that you might never come up with on your own.
That's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine that collaborative brainstorming could help build rapport and make the whole negotiation process feel less adversarial.
Definitely. The key is to create a safe space where both parties feel comfortable sharing ideas without judgment.
Right.
The goal is to get as many options on the table as possible, even if some of them seem crazy or impractical.
Yeah.
You never know where that next breakthrough might come from.
I love that idea of embracing the crazy during brainstorming. It frees us up to think differently and explore uncharted territory.
Right. And it leads us to that second obstacle, the search for a single answer. We often get so fixated on finding the solution that we miss out on other possibilities that might be even better.
It reminds me of that famous quote, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions.
Hmm.
It's all about taking that time to really understand the problem and consider a wide range of options.
Exactly. It's about shifting our mindset from finding the answer to exploring multiple possibilities.
Hmm.
The more options we have, the better equipped we are to find a solution that truly works for everyone.
Okay, let's move on to the third obstacle, the assumption of a fixed pie. I've definitely encountered this in negotiations. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that there's only so much to go around,
Right.
and that any gain for one side means a loss for the other.
It's a common misconception, but getting to yes challenges us to question that assumption. They argue that by focusing on shared interests and thinking creatively, we can often expand the pie and create more value for everyone involved.
It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. Instead of fighting over scraps, we can work together to create a bigger and better pie for everyone to share.
Exactly. And the book provides some great examples of how this can work in practice.
Okay.
Remember the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty we talked about earlier?
Uh-huh.
As focusing on their shared interests, security for Israel, sovereignty for Egypt, they were able to come up with a creative solution that expanded the pie.
Okay.
The demilitarization of the Sinai Peninsula?
That's a perfect illustration of how thinking outside the fixed pie mindset can lead to truly groundbreaking solutions.
Absolutely. And it brings us to that last obstacle, thinking that solving their problem is their problem. This mindset prevents us from seeing the potential for collaboration
Right.
and finding solutions that benefit both sides.
I can see how that would be a roadblock. It's like we're putting up walls instead of building bridges.
Exactly. Getting to yes encourages us to approach negotiations with a collaborative spirit, seeking to understand the other side's perspective,
Hmm.
and finding ways to help them achieve their goals while also achieving our own.
So instead of viewing the other party as an opponent, we should see them as a partner in problem solving.
Precisely. It's a fundamental shift in mindset that can open up a whole new world of possibilities for finding mutually beneficial agreements.
Okay, so we've identified these four major obstacles to inventing options. Now, how do we actually overcome them and start generating those creative solutions?
The book offers several practical tips. First, remember to separate inventing from deciding, brainstorm freely without judgment. Second, challenge that fixed pie assumption. Look for ways to expand the pie and create more value for both sides.
Okay.
Third, consider how you can make it easier for the other party to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
If you can frame a solution in a way that aligns with their interests and values, they'll be much more likely to agree.
Those are great tips. It's all about shifting our perspective from me versus them to us working together to solve a problem.
Exactly. And it leads us seamlessly to the final principle of principled negotiation, insisting on using objective criteria.
Okay, let's talk about that. Why are objective criteria so important in negotiations?
Well, think back to that example of haggling over the brass dish in the secondhand store.
Yeah.
It's essentially a battle of wills, with each side trying to force the other to accept their price.
Right. I can see how that can get pretty heated and doesn't always lead to a fair outcome.
Exactly. Objective criteria provide a way to de-escalate the conflict and shift the focus from personal opinions to agreed-upon standards.
So instead of saying, I think it's worth $20, you might say, based on recent sales of similar items, the fair market value is $25.
Precisely. By using an external benchmark that both sides can agree on, the negotiation becomes less about ego and more about finding a fair and reasonable solution.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
What are some examples of objective criteria that people can use in negotiations?
The book mentions several, including market value, expert opinion, legal precedent, scientific data, industry standards, and even moral principles.
So depending on the situation, we can refer to things like real estate listings, professional appraisals, court rulings, research studies, or ethical guidelines.
Exactly. By grounding the negotiation in objective criteria, we create a more level playing field
Mm-hmm.
and reduce the likelihood of one side feeling bullied or taken advantage of.
This is really making me think about how I approach negotiations in my own life. I tend to get so focused on my own perspective and what I want to achieve. But I'm realizing that taking the time to understand the other person's interests, brainstorm creative options, and look for objective criteria could lead to much better outcomes.
That's the beauty of getting to you. Yes, it provides a framework for negotiation that's both principled and practical.
I'm starting to see how these principles can be applied not just in formal negotiations, but in everyday interactions as well.
Absolutely. Think about dealing with a difficult coworker, resolving a conflict with a family member, or even negotiating with your kids about bedtime. The principles of principled negotiation can help you navigate these situations more effectively and build stronger relationships.
This deep dive has been so insightful. I feel like I'm gaining a whole new set of tools for approaching all sorts of challenging situations.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in getting to your half.
Yes.
But I think we've laid a solid foundation for understanding the power of principled negotiation.
Yeah, right. But before we wrap up, let's dive a little deeper into some practical techniques for putting these principles into action. Because as you said earlier, it's not just about understanding the theory.
Right.
It's about applying these principles in real-life situations.
Absolutely. Let's explore some specific strategies for navigating the people problem and making sure our communication is clear, effective, and respectful.
Okay, so we've covered those four principles, but how do we actually, put them into practice? Especially when it comes to that whole people problem thing. You mentioned strategies. What are some tangible things we can do?
Well, one of the most important things is understanding the other side's perspective. Getting to yes talks about, putting ourselves in their shoes.
Yeah, and I can imagine that's tough, especially in the heat of the moment when you disagree.
Right.
It's hard to see things from their point of view when you feel strongly about your own.
It definitely takes effort, but remember, understanding doesn't equal agreement. It's about gaining insight into their thinking, their motivations, their concerns, even their fears. This can help you find common ground and tailor your approach.
The book cautions against letting our fears dictate how we interpret the other side's intentions, right?
Exactly. It's easy to assume the worst, but that can lead to a defensive and reactive stance.
Right.
It just makes it harder to work collaboratively toward a solution.
And blaming them for the problem probably doesn't help.
Not at all. It just creates more tension and makes it harder to find a mutually beneficial outcome.
So how can we deal with those tricky people problems more constructively?
Well, getting to yes suggests being open about those differing perceptions. Acknowledge their feelings even if you don't agree with them. Look for opportunities to act in a way that challenges their preconceptions.
It's like that powerful example they used President Sadat's visit to Jerusalem back in '77.
Right, such a great example. He went right to the heart of what was considered enemy territory. That bold move signaled a genuine desire for peace, and it helped shift the entire dynamic of the negotiations.
Yeah, the book also stresses the importance of communication, especially active listening.
Oh, listening is crucial in any negotiation. It's not just about hearing words, but truly understanding the message behind them.
They give that advice to speak about yourself, not about them.
Yes. Instead of accusing with, you broke your word, you might say, I feel let down. It expresses the same sentiment, but without the blame that can trigger defensiveness.
Yeah, being mindful of our language can make a big difference, it seems.
Absolutely. Speak for a purpose. Think before you speak and be aware of the impact your words can have.
It sounds like getting to yes is all about laying that solid foundation for productive negotiation before you even get to the bargaining table.
Right. They call it prevention works best. Investing in the relationship, building trust, and structuring the negotiation to minimize conflict, this sets the stage for a more collaborative and successful outcome.
Thinking back on past negotiations, I can see where I went wrong. I went in feeling stressed and adversarial, which probably didn't help.
It's a common trap. But the book encourages us to see the other side not as an opponent, but as a partner. Like we're working together to solve a shared problem.
It's a powerful shift in perspective. It takes the pressure off and allows for more creativity and collaboration.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it can dramatically improve the outcome of the negotiation.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on something that's been on my mind throughout our conversation. You mentioned that getting to yes isn't just for those, formal negotiations. How can we apply these principles to everyday life?
That's what makes this book so valuable. These principles are relevant in so many situations. Think about navigating a disagreement with a coworker, resolving a conflict with a family member, or even negotiating bedtime with your kids.
I can see how these principles could help us build stronger relationships. Instead of getting stuck in those power struggles, we can communicate more effectively, understand each other's needs, and find solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly. It's about moving away from that win-lose mentality and embracing a more collaborative and empathetic approach. And the beauty of it is, these skills become more natural with practice.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I'm walking away with a new toolkit for approaching all sorts of challenges in my, personal and professional life.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, this is just a starting point. Getting to yes is packed with even more insights and practical advice. We highly recommend diving into the full audiobook to really deepen your understanding.
We've covered the core principles, but the book goes into much more detail. It offers techniques for handling difficult people, overcoming obstacles, and making sure those agreements actually stick.
Yeah, it's a valuable resource for anyone who wants to become a more effective negotiator and build stronger, more collaborative relationships.
So as you navigate the complexities of life, remember to separate the people from the problem, focus on interests, invent options, and insist on using objective criteria.
Right.
And above all, approach every interaction with a spirit of collaboration and a genuine desire to find solutions that work for everyone involved.
Wise words.
Eh,
Happy negotiating.